That's okay. I'll post it later.
He's
It's
seen
good.
a poor people.
I know, right? I am actually not tech savvy at all.
Really?
The book was the reason why I got Instagram.
Hello, hello. Welcome to SessionWell. We've got our podcast up this evening. Thank you for joining us. We're a little late. My name is Adam Luke.
I'm Judy Yen.
And this is our amazing guest of the evening.
Hi, my name's Corinne Weber.
And so we've got a really crazy podcast today. It's so awesome that Corinne was willing to come on and do this. So, Corinne, what are we talking about this evening?
So actually we're talking about my recovery through anorexia, and actually just how it kind of brought me to the AMFT field and how I became really passionate in helping other people, and my story about recovery just in general.
Thank you. So SessionWell, what is that again? We are a podcast for whether you're pre-licensed, you're licensed as a therapist or a social worker, or you're a regular person. So that's what this is going to be so great, is having Corinne here, because this is a topic we need to talk about. Mm-hmm. It's a topic that's not talked about very often, and there's a huge population that could benefit from this conversation.
Right. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself first?
So,
your background?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Singapore. I was born in Dallas, Texas. And then when I was 9, my family uprooted to move overseas. And so we lived in Singapore. It was my mom, dad, and my twin brother and I. Definitely a culture shock. Definitely a different experience, but it was amazing. Loved every single part of it, but there were some challenges that came out of that. And that's, of course, part of the reason why I'm here to talk to you about it today. But yeah, so...
And then you're currently an MFT trainee?
Yes, I'm currently an MFT trainee. I'm actually studying at Chapman University.
We do pick other universities. We don't just stick with Hope.
Totally.
She's awesome. So is Chapman.
Yes, thank you. I also work at Hope Counseling Center as an external trainee. And I also work for an organization called Balanced Families, working with children who have cerebral palsy and their parents who actually go through parental counseling. So I run some of those groups.
And then you graduate in May too, right?
I do, 99 days.
99 days.
99
Not that you're
days.
counting.
Not that I'm counting at all, no.
Wow.
So I'm very excited.
And then we also always ask them like some of the titles that they have too. So aside from being an MFT trainee, you also said that you were an author and motivational speaker.
Yes, exactly. So I've spoken because of the book that I've written, Where the Monster Waits. I have actually been able, this has been an amazing platform for me to speak in Singapore and also here in the United States. I've been able to talk with people one-on-one just about recovery, and also talk to various recovery centers, hospitals, and classes, both in Singapore and here in the United States.
So you've spoken on this topic in Singapore.
Yes, I have.
International speaker as well. That's how awesome this podcast is getting.
We have amazing guests.
Oh, gosh.
So, what made you want to bring out this story and share this story?
You know, I think it's... In our society, we have a lot of stigma associated with mental health. And there's not enough talk about it, especially with eating disorders in general. It's a shame topic. Like, you're not supposed to talk about it. And so one of the things that I wanted to do was bring out my story just to help one person. And if I helped one person, then I'm doing my job.
Wow.
So if my pain and my suffering could help talk through the stigma and break the shame, then it was all worth it.
Now, before this podcast started, we were actually talking a little bit with Corinne on, like, again, the courage to put this to paper, right?
For everybody to read.
Definitely check the book out. If you go to Amazon, you'll see that there's 15 reviews. Pretty much all of them are 5 stars. Really on changing the way that we go towards this.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's my narrative.
I appreciate it.
So do you want to like share some of your narrative with audience? Or?
Absolutely. So my story, you know, I grew up as an American expat, and so growing up overseas with my family, we had a lot of different experiences, and so I was fortunate enough to go to one of the top American schools in the world, really.
Wow.
And then on top of that, my brother and I, we were able to travel the world as children, so we had a different perspective. But moving overseas was definitely a difficult transition. But I always had my twin brother. We were best friends. And so basically, when we moved overseas, we had our tight-knit family. It was full of hope. My family was very close. We were a Christian family that had a lot of joy, a lot of laughs. But when we actually got to high school, a lot of things changed.
Okay.
And so darkness kind of began to creep into our story. And so my brother, when he became a freshman in high school, he suffered from depression. And so when that kind of hit my brother, he started experimenting with alcohol and different substances and drugs. And so that kind of, my brother went from being a teddy bear and this lovely go-get-em sort of guy to a very angry person. And so I watched my brother just completely deteriorate into a person that I didn't know. And it was very hard and very confusing for me. And I was this perfectionist that felt like I needed to keep my family together. But as he continued to get worse and as his depression continued to get worse, he started self-harming. And so with that, he started to unravel and my family started to unravel. And so that was freshman year. And over the course of 2 more years, my junior year, my parents knew that they needed to get him a higher level of care. So they actually decided to send him back to the United States to get treatment. So with that, they were also concerned that he was going to take his life. Because again, he was lost in his own depression and mental health issues. And so my mom decided that she was going to go with him. And I didn't know for how long. But in that moment, I felt like I had failed. I didn't hold my family together. That perfect little girl couldn't hold that loving, caring Christian family together. And I felt like that was my fault. My dad was around, but unfortunately he was an international lawyer. So he traveled to a lot of different places. So you can imagine being a junior young woman learning who she is and how to be autonomous with no guidance. I felt completely abandoned and I had a lot of anger within me. And so when my brother and my mother left, I didn't know what to do with that pain. So that perfectionism inside of me, I just thought, okay, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to push it all down. I'm going to make the world think that I'm fine and I will be fine. Except we know that's not how the world works. But I did my best. And with all of this sadness and all of this pain inside me, I started to get angry. And with that anger and resentment and pain, I ended up losing weight. And I'll never forget it, but I remember going to school and people started to notice that I had lost weight and people started to make comments. Teachers, friends, people within my Christian community would come up to me and they'd say, "Wow, Corinne, have you lost weight? You look amazing." And that was the one thing that I heard. And I was like, wow, I'm losing weight. People are noticing. I'm seen. So I started to realize that maybe if I continue to lose weight, I'll be getting all of this positive attention and I'll be beautiful and I'll be wanted. And so with that, I continued to lose weight. I focused in on that and for lack of a better word, that became my obsession. Fast forward to a year later, my senior year, my brother actually came back.
Okay.
And he came back to his old self. He was my brother again. And unfortunately, it's kind of like the prodigal son, right? He came home fully himself, fully recovered and happy. But I was lost. I was gone. That anger was still there. That resentment was still there. And now there was this fixation of losing weight and being this perfect, beautiful woman that I've always wanted to be. But I also didn't want anything to do with my family since they abandoned me. So throughout senior year, I actually got accepted to my dream school, which was Chapman University, in undergrad. However, during my senior year, I was also diagnosed with anorexia. And that was a big blow for me. I was absolutely crushed, but I also didn't believe that this was a thing. I didn't believe I had a problem. I didn't think losing weight was an issue.
Right.
You're just trying to be healthy.
Exactly. And
did your family point it out to you, or was it your friends, teachers?
So, my dad started to notice that something was going on. My mom did too, but they thought I was being healthy. And they thought that they knew that I had lost a lot of weight, but again, there was that denial, right? It's hard to know what to look for.
Yeah.
They
when
knew,
no one talks about it.
Exactly. They knew that I was angry, and they tried to repair that, but I wasn't about to let them heal me. When my eating disorder was the one thing that stuck through all of this with me, and I wasn't willing to give that up. So I got into Chapman. All of my doctors said this is not a good idea. She should not be going to college. She should be focusing on her recovery. And this crushed me, but after talking through it with my parents, they decided that I could go as long as I had a psychologist and a nutritionist and that I went twice a week. Again, I didn't have a problem.
Yeah.
Right.
So I had this plot in my head that I was going to go overseas, back to the United States, and that I was just going to go maybe once or twice. And then I was going to just leave it.
Stay in your lane.
Exactly, stay in my lane, because nothing was wrong with me. However, I didn't plan on the fact of the mental health issue, that aspect becoming such a big weight for me.
Yeah.
So it was a culture shock coming back to the United States.
Yeah.
Right.
And then all of a sudden I was alone again.
Because you had roughly spent 9 years away from the States.
Exactly.
From like 9 to 18.
9 to 18. So I didn't have my family. I was in a new world. I was going to college, trying to find myself again. But also there was this voice inside my head that just kept getting louder and louder, telling me that I wasn't good enough, telling me that I was fat, telling me that I didn't deserve to live. So I was battling that every single day. And as I continued through my freshman year, at 79 pounds, my body started shutting down. And as I was trying to go to class, I couldn't focus. I couldn't stay awake. And so with that, my grades started to drop. I wasn't able to go out and hang out with friends because I was sleeping 14 hours a day.
Wow.
So as all of these things were happening, I slipped into my own depression. So I became very isolated and secluded. And again, these voices were around all the time telling me that I was worthless. And it got to a point where I didn't want to do it anymore. I was way too tired. Living, getting up was just excruciating and exhausting. And so one day, September 11th, 2011, I actually woke up from a nap after class, and I realized I didn't want to live anymore. I didn't want to live this life, and I couldn't do it. It was too hard. And so during that moment, I had suicidal thoughts, but for some reason, somewhere inside of me, I found that I wanted to try one more thing. And so that day, I actually got on my knees and I started praying for the first time in 3 years.
Wow.
I didn't want to believe in a God that could allow me to go through so much pain for so long, but it was the last thing that I could do.
Yeah.
And so I got on my knees, I started crying, I started praying, and I said, God, if you're there, if you're real, you need to show me a sign, because I can't do this. I won't do it. And not 2 minutes later, I get a knock on my door. And again, I'm the only one in the dorm room. I had 2 roommates at the time. And I open the door, and it's actually my closest friend that I had made within my first year. And she lived in my dorm room, and she was 2 stories above me. And she came down, and she looked concerned. And she said, Corinne, I don't know what's going on, but I had this feeling, and I just needed to come check on you. Are you okay? And in that moment, my life changed.
Yeah.
And I knew my life needed to change and that my life was worth living. And that was the sign that made me completely change my life.
Wow.
And it was the hardest thing I've probably ever had to do is look the monster dead in the face and really come to the realization that I had a problem and that I really needed help. But it's also brought about abundant blessings. It's the reason why I'm sitting in front of you today.
Yeah. So you had wrestled with it for 3 years.
So I had wrestled with it, so for 3 or 4 years at that point in time. So, and it took me a good 7 to get to a good place.
Okay.
So it was a long time, but
Yeah.
it was worth it for sure. I ended up graduating with a communications major.
Okay.
And I actually had a diary from the entire time that I was struggling, which actually became the book.
Okay.
And in 2015, I graduated and I released the book within a month of each other. And then the book was actually picked up in 2015 for a feature film. So that also was able to promote a platform for me to speak about this. So
You really did create a space for people to be invited into.
yeah, God did it.
Yeah.
God did it. He did. I'm just the vessel at the end of the day.
It's an amazing way to look at that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, that was our executive producer, Judy,
Our mascot.
our mascot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I'm taken back for a second. I was like,
I have a question.
please, go for it.
I guess, what did your recovery look like? So you're saying that took about 7 years?
Yeah.
Like what, because someone on the outside, maybe those of us that don't know what that really means, like what does that look like for you?
So I actually have a therapist, and I've had this therapist since the beginning of my recovery. She is absolutely incredible. It was a lot of internal battles within myself, right? Because I had developed this, the only way that I can really truly describe it is a voice, right? So my eating disorder, what a lot of us in the community call ED, it is this obsession that you have to be a certain way or that you have to lose weight in order to get this approval or to be beautiful, right? And it was almost like an addiction, really. Like when I saw the numbers drop, that was the best thing ever. Like it was almost like a high. It was very
like euphoria,
interesting.
right?
Exactly.
Did you have a goal though? Or is it just constantly just seeing the decline, like the losing of weight, that's enough? Or is like, did you have a goal?
Yeah. So I always had a goal, but whenever I met that goal, it was never enough. So I remember when I first began, I was like 130. And I just thought, if I could just get to 100 pounds, then I'll be great. Then I'll be beautiful. But what my mind kind of did was once I reached 100, I was like, I wonder if I can get to 99.
Yeah.
And I wonder if people will notice. I wonder if I'll notice my hips more or my jawline. That's what I wanted. I wanted to see my back. Like I wanted to be thin because that was beautiful in my mind. So my recovery really was a lot of internal struggle, a lot of support from my friends and also my family, like trying to systemic, right? Get the family involved and try and see the patterns and heal those attachment wounds. But also learning how to combat that voice. Because that voice, I didn't realize for so long it was my enemy. It was trying to kill me.
It was a monster that you reframed. Yeah.
It was my monster, and it's still there. Like every single day, it's a fight. But I now have the tools in order to fight that good fight. And in order to sit here and actually talk to you guys today about it. But yeah, that's kind of, in a nutshell, how I kind of looked recovery in the face.
That's amazing.
So, one of the a bajillion takeaways I'm hearing from here, but you're really highlighting the fact that, especially with depression, anorexia, we first start off by limiting our support group, right?
Yes.
And so your road back was as soon as you started building that in, right?
Yeah, exactly. My sisters at the time, because I was in a sorority, they were a saving grace for me because my family was so far away. They would try and be there as often as they could, but my sisters were actually the ones who really stepped in, sat with me at meals, was the one that picked me up off the floor when I would faint or when I would fall. They were the ones driving me to therapy. So having that group was key, absolutely key. So
let's think that hopefully this video, this podcast reaches out to people who need to hear this, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where do you say you start? Where does someone start on this journey?
Ask for help.
Okay.
Like, it is scary. It is so unbelievably scary to be that vulnerable, to admit that there's a problem and that you can't keep going down this road. And actually, not only admitting it to yourself, but to somebody else. But if there's one thing that I would say is that you're worth it and your life is worth it. You don't need to live in this dark place where there's no light. There's always a candle somewhere. You just need to say something at the end of the day.
So we're going to work systemic.
Okay.
So there's that person.
Of course.
How about to the parent?
Right.
Oh my, to the parent.
Or parents, but you know,
I'm curious how has your family been through this whole process?
It was really tough for them because, you know, when we lived in Singapore, we wanted to be that perfect little family, right? And we wanted to seem like the perfect little family, but nothing's perfect. Perfect doesn't exist except for Jesus and God. You know, they are perfect, but nothing on this earth is perfect. So actually my dad, the first little chapter is my dad's letter to how he actually, looking back, how he's viewed it all. But for my parents, they knew something was wrong, but they didn't know how to approach it. And there was that level of denial there. But when they actually voiced that something was wrong, coming together as a unit was a big deal for them. Also, like, seeking out counseling and being that collateral in the room, and really helping me and supporting me by asking me, what do you need in this time? Like, what does it look like? What does support look like for you? Like, my mom, she would sit with me at meals and I would be bawling because I didn't want to. I literally had this image that if I ate one pancake, I would blow up the next day into a whale. Like, it's a distortion, right? So she would literally sit there and say, you're okay. You're okay. You're okay. Over and over and over again. And the next day I wouldn't blow up. And I was okay. So those messages are so important. Like, we love you enough. And how can we meet you where you're at? Being curious.
And with you bringing that up as a fact of, like, exactly what you said, whether you have a cognitive distortion or not, it was very real for you in that moment.
Absolutely.
So many times, whether it's anorexia or it's substance abuse, it's any form of addiction, people can so easily be like, I don't get it. Just eat the damn pancake.
Yes.
And it's like, there's so much damage in that, right?
Yes.
It's not that the person doesn't even realize it. It's just like, yeah, that doesn't sound like a true idea, but I am still in fear of it.
Absolutely. That was one thing actually my dad said to me verbatim was, you're in the best position ever. You get to eat whatever you want, whenever you want. Why don't you just sit there and eat a pizza? And I had to look at him and basically tell him, this is not helping. What you don't understand is that I'm terrified. And I'm broken inside. And you can't just sit here and just tell me to eat. That's not how this works. And he didn't get that for the longest time, but through therapy, through talking about it, that's where we were able to find some common ground.
I think with, like, my background of working with families who are going through addiction, I'm hearing some similarities in the fact that, believe it or not, you were grieving something and they were grieving something at the same time, and we don't, as a society, feel comfortable bringing the idea of that grief in.
Yes.
So even though you had an unhealthy picture for yourself, you had to grieve the fact that wasn't what you was going to help you live.
Yeah.
And they needed to grieve the image of what their daughter was.
Absolutely.
Who
For them
she
as
is.
parents.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And we were also grieving the loss of our family.
Right. Because the perfect image of your family.
Yes. I mean, after all of this, we became very different people. And we had suffered a lot of various things: depression, suicidal ideation, anorexia, all of those things. That's a lot to overcome, but coming together and really overcoming some of these things empowered us to come back together as a new family, as a new system, right? To look forward to the future.
That's what I hope people are hearing, is the fact that you had this process of grief to create the place for the rebirth of your family,
Absolutely.
of your identity. And so this is a process we have to go through. You couldn't have this if we shortcut it, right?
Absolutely.
Oh, just change. It doesn't happen that way.
No, absolutely not.
And it's the ugly part of therapy. It's the ugly part of the monster. But you have to get through this.
Absolutely. It was interesting because something hit me. Actually, a client brought this up. He had said, there's a ruthlessness to therapy. And that is so powerful because it's so true.
It is so true.
It's actually why you go to therapy. It's funny because for myself, I said therapy is unforgiving. And the reason why it's unforgiving is I come to pay a person to tell me the things I won't get from my family or that I won't tell myself.
Yes.
And it's the beauty. Therapy's not easy, but you go for the pain.
100%.
It's just like going to the gym.
Oh yeah.
I have to work my brain out as hard. You want the results, it's going to hurt. You're going to wake up with those moments of the cognitive stretches and all that good stuff.
Absolutely.
But you have to go through that process.
Because the end result's amazing.
So, one more systemic step.
Of course.
Okay, you were talking about that friend, and that moment you had, right? What would you do if you were a friend to yourself at that period of time? And I know, cognitive interweave right there.
Wow, totally. I see the therapist in you.
But I'm trying to put myself in that spot of like, what happens if I see my friend and
or a sister,
or
a brother.
I got the love, the concern. I want to come at this right side, but how do I even start the conversation without damaging the person?
Yeah, no kidding. You know, I think there's something to be said to sit with somebody in their pain and in their journey, right? We do it all the time as therapists, but we often forget that the closest people to us, we can also do that with them. And sometimes people just need a friend or somebody to sit with them in that hole, in that pain.
Yeah.
So I think if I were to go back and if I was a friend of myself, I would sit there and be that placeholder
There you go.
where you can bring that love, that empathy into the room and slowly approach the fact that, hey, are you okay? Like, what's going on? I've noticed that something's happening, but I'm not quite sure what it is. So I just want to check in with you and I want to make sure that you're okay. Because that's truly seeing somebody. That's truly sitting with them in their pain. It's not brushing it off to the side and saying, if you need me, I'm here, right? So I think that's a huge takeaway for people to just know, like, if you see somebody in pain that you love, sit with them there. I know it's hard, but maybe they need it, you know?
I love what you said. It's empathy, not sympathy.
Right.
And that, I think we get that confused. Sympathy generally is when you start naming things for people.
Yeah.
Brene Brown has a really good, like a little cartoon thing about empathy versus sympathy. Because I think a lot of people get those two things confused.
Totally.
And I think empathy is like attunement. It's like, I see your pain, I feel it with you. And I think a lot of times too, like what you're saying, just sitting with people is what we need. We don't need you to fix it. We don't need you to kind of say, oh, I'm kind of here, but just literally like, what do you need?
Yeah.
I see it. I think that's super powerful.
It's the power of attachment right there.
There you go. And it's huge for therapists too to learn how to do that, right? There is a huge difference between sympathy and empathy. And so going there with that person as a therapist is a huge, big step that you need to be able to take with your clients, at least in my opinion. But.
Okay.
What has it been like for you working with clients? Like, are you comfortable with clients possibly reading your book? Maybe having a client that has eating disorder?
So I've really processed some of that with my therapist. I am worried about a client reading my book. But so far, I've had clients who have checked up on me on Google. They've seen the book, but they haven't read it. And a lot of them ask me about it, and I'm totally open with their questions because I think they deserve transparency on that level. But, you know, it's up to them if they want to read it or not. If they have questions, that's fine. But I did put this out there for a reason. I have a message, and that message is important, and I have no problem answering questions in regards to that. With eating disorder clients. That's my passion. Like, I absolutely adore that. And sitting there with a client, there's so much work that can be done in that moment. And I mean, it is a blessing and a gift to sit there with somebody who's going through something that was so close to my heart. But I've also found a passion with working with suicidal clients because I've also been there. And I know how dark it is, but if there's one light in a room, it can illuminate your world. Yeah. That's what we do every day.
Man, she's like just inspiration.
I can just listen to her talk all night. I'm like, just keep going.
Yeah, I'm about to melt over here like a Lifetime movie.
No, seriously.
Oh my God, no, Lifetime movie.
I love Lifetime movies. There are moments, I'm not going to lie, where I'm like kind of like, don't say anything because you might cry. Just let her keep talking.
Oh my gosh.
So it's good.
So I gotta know,
yes.
just sitting here with you.
Of course.
Because I imagine other licensed or pre-licensed clinicians and then just regular old people may want to know. What's the theoretical model you love in therapy?
Oh my gosh. So that's a hard one.
Okay.
I love CBT.
Okay.
For one, CBT, the cognitive distortions, the core beliefs, those are so important, and that's actually what got me through my own stuff. But also narrative therapy. So I wrote a book.
I wonder why. Yeah.
But read it. All of our stories, all of us, really, at the end of the day, we have our own unique story, right? So hearing that story from a client's perspective and being a co-author in that is also something that really interests me and draws me to a client. So we have this story, we have this past, we have these ideas about the future, but what about the now? What do we do right now in this moment? So that's what I really gravitate towards, the cognitive and also the narrative. Try and combine the two.
They go hand in hand in many ways.
So
Thought
true.
journals, all sorts of good stuff.
Yes, of course. Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much, Corinne.
Of course.
Is there any other last takeaways you want to let people know about?
How do people find you?
Yes.
Okay, so I have a website, CorinneWeber.net. If you'd like to reach out to me, please feel free. I also have an Instagram, Corinne Recovery. And yeah, if you'd like to email me, that's fine too, weber141@chapman.edu. So those are the 3 avenues that people can get in touch with me.
And probably around the fall, you'll be in a private practice.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers
I
crossed.
hope.
I think you will.
Personally, if you're out there and you're a supervisor in the Orange County area, and this right here
my
didn't
gosh.
tell you, oh goodness.
Thank you for the platform.
No, thank you for
Thank you for sharing your story with all of us.
for putting a voice to it, man.
Yeah.
Like that, again, I can't help but just see the courage in the book and our conversations.
Thank you.
And like you said, you're definitely you're a flashlight.
Oh, thank you.
You're not
Like
just
one
a
of those
little
big ones.
you're an LED light bar. I don't care what you are. You're bright.
Thank you so much. Do you mind if I say something real
Please.
quick?
Oh, no, go for
No,
it.
this is actually your podcast.
No. You asked me about 3 takeaways, and I think it's super important. 1, if you're struggling and you feel like life is too heavy for you, you are worth it. You are worth something, and your life is worth so much more than you can ever imagine. So please reach out to somebody if you feel like you need help. There is no shame and no weakness in that at all. Second, don't let anybody tell you no or that you can't. My parents were actually told when I was very young that I could only be a dishwasher because of my learning disabilities. And now I'm sitting here in front of you, graduating from a marriage and family therapy master's program.
And an author.
Yes. So don't ever let anybody tell you that you can't. And also, lastly, recovery is possible. It is absolutely possible, and you can do it, regardless of if it's the monster inside your own head, if it's, a substance that you're looking at. Recovery is absolutely possible.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Corinne.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And Corinne was kind enough to give us each a copy, so this one's ours. But she also gave us a copy to give away as well. So we will let you guys know on our Instagram SessionWell how we are going to give this away.
Yes, so like she said, we have a book to give away. We're looking forward to doing it. It will be on the Instagram. We'll let you know how to potentially win it. So again, her book is available on Amazon. Go out and grab it. It's it's pretty crazy. So thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for listening to us on your drive in from work, watching us live. We always appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Guys.
Sorry, one thing. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No,
Next week is Valentine's Day, and so whether you are celebrating the holiday or not, we are just going to take a self-care day. So we'll be back on the 21st?
Yes, we will be.
The 21st, and then the 28th, and then our other guests as well. So take a good break next week, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you guys. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.